our senior counsel for global affairs, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who just tweeted yesterday, the Communist Party of China was actively engaged in viral research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Every piece of evidence points to a leak from this lab. Secretary Pompeo, we're now seeing what's reported now is it's no news to you, but Washington, the media, Dr. Fauci, everything is now everybody's open now to what they were calling a conspiracy. They were attacking you about it even. They were attacking President Trump about it. They were attacking senators about it. Anyone who talked about a lab leak theory, not even an intentional leak, but a lab leak, lab-created theory. But you've been pointing it to over a year now. Is the only thing that's changed is that Dr. Fauci has suddenly told the media, well, maybe he was wrong?
You know, it's been a long year making the case, and it was important because it's not about vindication. It's about the world understanding what took place here. We still don't know all the details. The Chinese Communist Party is continuing its flagrant cover-up. But all the facts that you've now seen come to light, we released a bunch of them back in January, now this intelligence report. I will tell you this. I assume Dr. Fauci had access to all this same information. Why he changed his mind now, I don't know. He can explain it. But the correct answer has to be that we need the data set that finds out where patient zero came from, what really happened, and every piece of evidence. I've been talking about this since spring of last year, over a year ago now. Every piece of evidence that we have seen in that year suggests that the Wuhan Institute of Virology is the place from which this virus leaked. We know they were doing virus studies on bat viruses. We know that they were doing something called gain-of-function, essentially supercharging viruses. We know that the military was involved in work at that same laboratory. We now know that there were workers at that laboratory who were hospitalized with symptoms consistent with the Wuhan virus. All of this data set leads me to the conclusion that this came from there. And if we're wrong, if that's not true, the Chinese Communist Party could disprove it in a minute, and they've chosen not to do so.
Yeah, I was going to follow up with that, Mike, and that was, we know that China was aggressive and has been aggressive in their campaign to deny culpability, to hide evidence. They didn't cooperate with the World Health Organization, which they have always touted, but they didn't really cooperate with the World Health Organization. They really didn't cooperate with the rest of the globe in dealing with this. So what does it tell us about the Communist Party of China's complicity in this, since, as you just said, they could clarify this in a nanosecond?
Jay, it means that they're at the very least guilty of a cover of a virus that came out of Wuhan that has now killed more than 3 million people and destroyed billions of dollars worth of wealth. That's the best case scenario for the Chinese Communist Party today. You know, your point about not providing information. I remember we were trying, State Department was trying, HHS was trying, Dr. Redfield, we were all trying to get information in January of 2020 about what the Chinese knew and what was going on, and they gave us the shutout. No info, disappearing doctors, disappearing journalists. This is what authoritarian regimes do. This is why the work of the ACLJ is so important, right? We know how authoritarian regimes behave. They deny basic freedoms, religious freedom, but also the freedom to talk about what you're doing.
Right.
And they shut everybody down. It is tragic. I'm confident that had the world known earlier, we would have had fewer people lost this past year. And I am equally confident that the risk that something like this happens again, which is my greatest fear, right? Jay, this lab's still open. The lab's still doing viral research. There's still so much we don't know. We could have the next one take out 30 million people.
You know, we've been talking about the geopolitical significance of all this. What does it mean as you move forward? It's not just we've now uncovered this or you've seen it in the intelligence report. It's now, what do you do? And our senior counsel, Andy Economo, has a question for you. Andy?
Yeah, Secretary Pompeo, you tweeted that China must be held accountable. What exactly do you mean by accountable? What do we have to do to hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable in your estimation?
So I'll give 3 easy answers, and then we can talk about other things one could do. Easy on, kick them out of the World Health Organization. They corrupted it. They politicized it. They were co-conspirators alongside of it. They shouldn't be part of an international body whose sole function is to prevent pandemics, right? WHO has one job when it comes to pandemics. They failed. China shouldn't be part of it. Second, you know, there's an Olympics in 2020. I call it the Genocide Olympics because of what's happening in Western China. The whole world should say, I'm not going to send my athletes, my press, my businesses to this place and reward a regime that is continuing to deny the world information about the pandemic that's the worst one in 100 years. A third one, we know some of the leaders. We should put real pressure on them by sanctioning them for their role in the cover-up. And then there's a half a dozen other things that would be straightforward, that are within the control of leaders today, and we could impose real costs on the Chinese Communist Party. And when the costs are high enough, the Chinese Communist Party will have to come clean.
Yeah, I get concerned because Secretary Pompeo, on the one hand, the Biden administration, the White House, is now saying, even HHS Secretary Becerra is saying, the World Health Organization has got to now reconduct a more transparent investigation. But they're still relying on the World Health Organization, which many believe, widely because of the Chinese influence there and their lack of being able to get inside and get to the real information. The last time they tried to do this investigation, couldn't the U.S. put more pressure on China? Couldn't the Biden administration put more pressure on China to get a more a reliable investigative team, whether it was made up of Americans and people from other countries, but maybe outside the WHO, who even, I guess, the Biden administration is acknowledging now they don't believe their first investigation should be accepted.
I remember the Biden administration and folks who became part of the Biden administration were turning to the WHO investigation as this was our solution, but this was doomed to fail. There were people with conflicts of interest. And second, anytime you're doing this at the permission of the Chinese Communist Party, they're going to give you curated information that doesn't amount to a hill of beans. It was a total failure. The WHO doesn't have the capacity to get the answers that are needed. It's going to take real state power to convince the Chinese Communist Party to cooperate. It's going to be really hard to do. I don't make light of that. But what you can't do is pretend. You can't conduct pretend investigations and then have doctors, including folks like Dr. Fauci, who talked about that WHO investigation as something that might lead to important discoveries. We knew it was doomed to fail when it began. We shouldn't have relied upon it at any point in time.
What is the consequence, Secretary Pompeo, if in fact this information comes out as it is? It's starting to come out in droves now, and we find out that, number one, it was not created. It was not a wet market situation. It was actually intentionally created. We don't know if it was intentionally leaked out. We do know that in November that there was scientists hospitalized with this. If the world does nothing here, we only have a minute, what happens?
The world can't. There's no way to look the other way. I think we're at that point now. Maybe others will still want to see more. I think the world must respond. There must be accountability. There are ways to impose liability on the Chinese Communist Party. We saw this with Chernobyl, right? This was the same kind of thing where a terrible tragedy was covered up by the authoritarian government. This is the same kind of cover-up. Got to impose enormous costs on them. We don't have enough time to go into them, but there are methodologies by which this can be done. And not just the United States, but the whole world must unite against this, or we will suffer something like this once again.
As always, our Senior Counsel for Global Affairs, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, thank you for joining us.